Greetings, everybody. It's Gary Brown with the user group. I want to welcome you to the UniLink webinar today. Today's presentation is being done by David Humer, who's been with UniLink as long as I can remember. And he's going to be joined by Tony. Tony as a resource. And David, go ahead and take it away.
And you can see my screen all right?
Yes, everything looks good.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I know everyone's time is crunched these days, and we certainly recognize how valuable that is and certainly appreciate your attendance. And as Tony was saying, Tony Palermo from the UniLink group is on as well in case we have some additional questions. But our whole premise here is going to be just EDI. As Gary said, it's much more encompassing than simply the old-fashioned, what was called the X12, a particular prescribed data format, and only being able to send really a very limited number of business transactions back and forth. And Tony's come up with this premise that obviously everyone can continue to do manual processing. You have personnel in-house, so clearly it's something you can do, but our contention is you can't do it indefinitely, that the world is moving ahead. Everyone's got to become more efficient, and frankly, people are just no longer willing to put up with manual processes and manual data entries. Just a little bit of a background. We are headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. We've been in business for 22 years, and we're focused solely on distribution solutions and what we term a universal EDI. And everyone's, I'm sure, familiar with things like Paychex or ADP. We do the same thing for people and their EDI. And we'll talk more about this universal EDI concept because we do certainly believe that that is where the whole business focus is going, and really where technology is going. So, you know, we're going to talk about where EDI fits, how you might go about doing this, and we're going to look at recent trends and then kind of what we are seeing in the marketplace and with our customers as the next wave of things that's coming down the line. And then when you start looking at EDI from your business perspective, we want to make sure that you're taking in everything that's involved. A lot of times people that haven't been involved with this, they either don't account for all the moving parts that go into this, or really more the predominant pitfall is they view it as an enormous hurdle that is almost impossible to overcome. And then we're going to talk about some of the opportunities you have with EDI, much more than just this is a simple cost savings type of approach. So, you know, everyone is dealing with paper to some extent or another, and it just takes more of your people's time. There's more complexity, and that translates to more costs in your business. And clearly, it can't be 100% accurate. People that do this are professionals. They're fantastic at it, but you've still got people involved, so there are going to be errors involved, and it's just plainly less efficient to go about it this way. Now, with EDI, you get what we mean by expedited transactions is that you send a PO to a supplier, and rather than emailing or faxing something like this where it's going to sit in someone's you know, virtual inbox for some amount of time, this is being translated, it's delivered right into your trading partner's ERP, their accounting system, their ordering system. And we use the term trading partner because you really need to think about connecting to anybody you do business with, not just a vendor or supplier. There's customers, there's buying groups. We even have customers that have completely expanded beyond these basic concepts, but that's why we use the overarching term trading partner. You can get a receipt verification back. You know that at least from a basic syntax arrangement, the data is valid. And by compliance, a lot of your trading partners require you to do electronic connections. They simply won't do business with you, or what we're seeing more recently is if you send a manual transaction to somebody, they're fine with it, but they're going to charge you $100 a piece. And that number is reflective of really the labor that goes into manual data entry. So it's not just a punitive charge they're coming up with. They are covering their internal costs, and we'll talk some more about that. And think in terms of your customers. If you are the easiest company to do business with, you're more cooperative, you streamline their business processes, that gives you a leg up when it comes to competitiveness. So, you know, this is even more typical for yesterday, more so than even today, but people are looking at EDI from a very limited standpoint, very few connections to trading partners, and really it's in the past people have only been doing this to their vendors or suppliers, and clearly we use the term kicking and screaming basis, that people have been coming to us and wanting to do EDI because they're being forced into it. They've got their arm, you know, someone's strong arming them and twisting their arm, and they're saying, we need to do business with this customer or this vendor, but the only way we're going to be able to do that is with EDI. And more so today, and looking into the near-term future, our customers are taking an entirely different view, and they're looking at it as not just a small expense-saving effort, but they're looking at it as a way to differentiate themselves. So I'm sure many of you, looking at your company's approach to this and your internal dialogue that's been going on, can certainly relate to this resistance to doing EDI. When you go about doing this, you obviously, just like any other IT business process project, you can do this entirely in-house. You can also partner with someone like our company, which we are essentially an end-to-end outsourcing solution. And then we have some customers that do this as a hybrid or a mix. They have some what I would call legacy connections in place. They have maybe 2 or 3 big vendor suppliers that they've had in place for some time, but now they're looking at the other opportunities they have, and they say, gee, we just don't have the internal resources, or more so, we have internal resources, but we have much higher priorities we want to put them to work on. We don't want to maintain a whole staff that's going to take care of the care and feeding of EDI. So the way we worked with folks, as I said, we're an end-to-end single solution. By true commerce EDI, we mean we can connect to anyone and anything, and we're trusted, proven provider because we don't charge people until there is a tested connection in place. We've been growing the last few years about 30% clip, and we chalk that up to the fact that our customers are extremely satisfied. And we adhere to all the different standards and protocols, but keep in mind that in this arena, everybody has their own particular standards. So even if they generally comply with, you know, say an ABC standard, everyone is going to have their little nuances or their little business processes that have to be complied with. And we completely handle that, as it says, end-to-end here. Also, our solution, there is no software to buy, there's no capital expenditures, there's no annual software maintenance fees. The only thing that's required from your side is a little bit of time to get your ERP system connected to our data center. And then if you're sending outbound transactions like a PO to a supplier, you have to submit test cases. And if you're bringing in inbound data like an advance ship notice or invoice, you have to receive those and review them, give us any tweaks that are necessary to be done. We handle all that coordination with your trading partners, so you don't have to be concerned with what their communication requirements are, what their data format, or what kind of alphabet soup of requirements that they might have. That's all transparent from your standpoint. And then we have we can send back reports when your trading partners haven't acknowledged receipts, or we have a portal on our website that allows you to see transaction flow and ones that have been acknowledged or remain unacknowledged. So a little bit about the universal EDI that I want to stress is if any of you have previous experience with EDI, there's a term called X12, which is a particular data format, and that's been historically really the only data format that people have been sharing back and forth. Well, over the last 5 or 6 years, there's things called XML and CXML, and what we view EDI is it's a universal interchange of data from one computer system to another, irrespective of what the dictated data formats are. So one of our customers has even taken to this point to the extreme, in that they have automated tool cribs that have stocking levels in them, and it will generate a report that says, hey, I need some more of this particular product. And so it will generate what essentially becomes a PO to their suppliers, and then when the material comes in, it generates essentially what's like an advance ship notice, and we translate that and deliver it to the automated tool crib. So you can see this whole concept of one computer talking to another. You really have to expand your horizons and not be locked into EDI as simply I'm sending a PO from my computer to Square D or Honeywell or some supplier. And what we encourage folks to do is go and intercept these data transmissions before they're printed or mailed out. As long as it's in an electronic file, it can be a PDF that's not a scanned image, that's an actual data file. XML, we have folks that have their own homegrown data systems, and they have their own homegrown data file formats. All of that becomes transparent for you. No one has to worry about what the data formats are. And if you encounter the idea of, well, I'll just capture data with a optical character reader, just what we are finding is most folks doing that are incredibly dissatisfied because that OCR solution is not 100% accurate. Even if it's 99% accurate, you get those 1 out of every 100 transmissions that now goes into your ERP system, and there's been some incorrect data in that. What we're hearing from our customers is they will only find that out maybe 2 or 3 or 4 steps down the pipeline, and now they know there's something wrong with that transaction. Now they have to spend time and effort backtracking that, finding out what the error was, correcting it, and starting over again. And so just by having that one incorrect transmission, that can lead to 10 times the effort than if they had a true EDI connection there. And as I said, people are looking, it was like pulling teeth getting people to do EDI, whereas now people are coming to us and saying, geez, we've gotten the POs working, now we want to do these other transactions. And we've come up with this term, the core 4. We're finding the majority of our customers now, as a starting point, want to do POs, invoices, PO acknowledgments, and advanced ship notices. This is just almost becoming a de facto business standard for folks. And we have an amazing number of our customers that are doing business with Walmart, Amazon, Wayfair, Jet, these other ones. And I personally found that rather astounding. I didn't think of, like a tire distributor as doing tons of business with Amazon. And we have many of our customers that do 60, 80,000 transactions a month with Amazon. So clearly, Amazon is not going to deal with someone who is sending them manual documents. Amazon wouldn't even dream of interacting with a manual document. Same thing with Home Depot. We have lots of our customers working with these kind of really customers from their standpoint, and they wouldn't have those customers if they couldn't rapidly and conveniently adapt to their EDI requirements. So like I said, started out people only thought they had to do it with their vendors, and now their customers are becoming more savvy. They're actually pushing this with our distribution customers. And then kind of the next wave we're seeing in this is if you deal with any of your trading partners and they offer rebates to you, many of our especially industrial distribution type of customers, they get a significant amount of rebates. And this is a really complicated process because they get sheets with hundreds, thousands of SKUs or product lines that they have to get input into their ERP so that when they do transactions that touch on those items, that gets recorded and generates the rebate request to their supplier. And what we found is people that used to do this, they would maybe go through and they would cherry pick the, I don't know, 5–10% of the items on that list that they thought they would do the most business in, and they would manually enter that into their ERP. So they were losing 90–95% of the product lines that they may have been eligible for rebates. Well, we have worked with them and we've completely automated that process, and by doing that, now every time they sell something that is on that rebate list, they are now eligible and in fact receiving those monetary rebates. We have one customer, the CFO indicated that they actually file the rebate and they get the monetary check or electronic funds transfer before they even have to pay the invoice to that supplier. So, and they're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. So you can imagine the how happy the CFO with that distributor is. Also, another aspect that's changing, in the past there were these things called value-added networks, VANs, which still exist and are still required with many, especially the larger vendors and suppliers like a Home Depot. But more and more people are using other kind of communication protocols, and I've listed some of these as alphabet soup there. But again, those are other technological areas that if you outsource this, you don't have to have an AS2 server. You don't have to understand what the web services requirements or certificates that have to be in place. All of that is a single connection for you, and what your trading partners are requiring now becomes completely transparent to you. And then we discussed the OCR and the fact that you really need to be careful about the accuracy of that data. Let's see. When the manual processing, the thing I like to point out, you can see the items on here, but we were discussing this with Honeywell, and this was a metric that's now about 7 years old, and their internal number they used for what it took them to manually enter a PO line was 51 cents a line. Now, remember up here it says, what about the impact of errors? That doesn't take into account any of the soft dollar costs like What's an error due to your service reputation? If you send 100 instead of 10 and it was your error, then obviously you have to pay for the return shipment. And some companies say, especially if they're dealing with large items like shingles or something, they said an error in a PO could cost them $125 a PO just because they would now have to pay for shipping a compressor back or shipping a load of shingles back. So obviously this differs from your line of business, but these are all kind of things that many folks overlook. And so even if you took the basic 51 cents and you multiply that by the number of lines, especially on inbound documents, obviously manual processing is much more expensive than any of us really had been assuming it was. Now, as I said, you can do this in-house. You can see the items on here. I think, to me, one of the things people overlook the most is what it costs to have, if you have your own internal translation software, regardless of what that is. In the old days, it was something called Gentran, but now there are newer things. You still have to pay highly skilled technical people that are trained in that sort of thing. And then there are upgrades and updates to that software. You have to periodically retrain people. And then if you lose one of these resources, now you have to go out and you have to find another skilled and experienced person, or you have to completely go through the whole training and learning curve. And I know with many of these software packages, a single training program might be 2 or 3 days at $2,000 or $3,000 a day. So clearly that adds up and is many times something that folks overlook. There, as I mentioned, there are vans, and you can certainly do this through a van. Just keep in mind that their core business model is to sell the mapping software. So anytime you have the mapping software and the mapping responsibilities on your in-house side, then you're back to all the personnel, the skilled personnel, and the personnel training issues. And what way we approach this is we completely take all of this off your plate. So you don't have to have a van, you don't have to have a monthly mailbox fee, and you don't have to pay by kilocharacters. Our view is that we can do this at a fraction of the cost that someone can do it in-house. And the employee impact, you only need really a part-time person to, if you're doing testing, to generate the test and review the test. And after that, we handle all of the ongoing map tweaks. Every now and then your trading partners will make changes, or there'll be little business process tweaks that have to enter into this, and all that's included in your monthly fees. Again, adaptable new transaction types and ERP upgrades. Since we're handling the translation at a central data center, when ERP upgrades occur, we can do that by just remapping the transaction types you have in place. If you have 150, 200 different connections, each one of those doesn't have to be tackled all over again. It makes it a much more transparent process for you. In addition, we started out in 99 doing simply purchase orders. And since then, we've grown by our customers coming and saying, we want to do invoices, we want to do advanced ship notices, we want to do these rebates. We now do 42 different transaction types. So again, you don't have to invest in your staff in trying to solve these problems. All of that gets outsourced. You don't have to pay any capital outlays, and it maintains your business focus so that you can take your internal resources and focus them either on technology projects or customer service and sales growth projects. So when you make these decisions, you have to look at what your capabilities are, what your priorities are, what your customers, and it doesn't have to be real, but what does your customer perceive is going to make you the easiest company to do business with, so that they're going to choose to do most or all of their business with you. And it's not just that you get immediate return on investment, but your level of effort to get this up and running is so minuscule that your whole business process doesn't even miss a step. You know, these are all things that have to be accounted for and taken care of, and again, all of this is off of your plate. It's all handled, and the only time you get involved, as I said, is you generating tests, reviewing tests, and if there's any of your trading partners who are skeptical about moving ahead with EDI, you can get involved since you have the business relationship, and you can help move those types of things along. But again, these changing EDI technologies refer not just to data formats, but how people are dictating communications be done. As I mentioned earlier, people are moving away from the VAN, the value-added network, and there's all sorts of new little encoded communication methodologies, and all that becomes transparent for you. You don't have to keep up with what the latest ABC connection requirement is. As I said, we're a one-stop service. All this is included. If any VAN connections are required, that's part of the solution. So there's no software to buy. You only start paying once the maps are approved for production, and then immediately after that you can start your transaction flow. And here are just some what we see across the marketplace, where people have, they have to train people. Mapping software can be at least 25 to 50,000. You've got to have employees that are highly skilled, and so they aren't $25,000 a year employees, if such a thing exists, and you don't have to pay maintenance fees. So as I mentioned earlier, you get to focus on what's important to your business. On the EDI standpoint, as I said, we look at this as universal EDI. So rather than just a simplistic, I'm going to take a PO and send it from point A to point B, there's all sorts of really almost customized solutions that we mix in with our mapping. So when people have a small number of product number conversions to do, that can be done. If your system, and we're finding this more and more often now, many ERP systems only output a date or a couple dates, and their trading partners are now requiring literally 4 or 5 different dates. But if it's something that's calculatable, we can put in date offsets. So we can actually augment things that your ERP is not supplying to the EDI process in the mapping step. So as I said, it's much more business process driven and business process solution than simply taking a simple piece of data and changing it a little bit and sending it on. There are many more steps that can be involved there. And I mentioned the rebate transactions earlier. Just keep in mind that these require a pretty high level of experience with your ERP, and also an understanding your business processes. So if you have that need, keep in mind that each vendor is going to have really very specific little differences, or in many cases not so little, that have to be accommodated in the mapping. So start with a particular vendor and work through that, and then layer on each one after that, because it's not something that you can simply tackle as a shotgun. Let's see, I think we mentioned this. This is, as we said, this is not just a simple supplier-only solution. In fact, most people want to quickly get to doing EDI for the inbound processes. That has a tremendous value to them because now, you're not having to have your resources manually key in data. So, you get all the advantages of reduced errors, increased efficiency, higher customer service satisfaction. However, keep in mind that this is going to impact your business process. So it's going to look a little different when an invoice comes in electronically than when it comes in as a manual document and someone keys it in. So what we do with our folks that this is a new business process for them is we'll send it mapped to their ERP inbound specification so they can consume it electronically into their ERP, but then we can also take that electronic feed and translate it into a human readable form so it looks like an invoice, and we can email that to a distribution list. So while folks are getting up to speed on dealing with these inbound transactions, they have the actual manual version there in front of them so they can compare and see what their ERP system is doing with this electronic data. So that is a tremendous benefit when you're kind of getting your feet wet with this. And then after folks have become fully experienced with that, then they let us know. We just turn off those, essentially those manual carbon copies. I think we talked about these sort of things. Like we keep saying, it actually can be a sales differentiation. We had one customer that was doing business with a kind of the mid-Atlantic area of Home Depot, and they wanted to expand into the Midwest. And one of the requirements was they had to quickly accommodate that with EDI. And so we actually doubled their business, their revenue from Home Depot, and they didn't have to add a single new staff member. They simply redirected people to customer service for this increased level of sales and interaction with Home Depot. Some of you may have, Infor storefront pieces. We can interact with that so that customers can input that data into your system. We can, for the ones that are of value to you, we can turn that around and send that back to them in electronic format. So as I said earlier, expand your horizons as to what you view as an electronic connection. There's really, with this middleware sitting at our data center, we can really connect you to anything or allow your customers to be connected to you in any way they require. And as our marketing folks like to say, if you automate a poor process, expect a bigger mess faster. And I think clearly with dealing with more and more paper and folks' business expanding, this is something you need to tackle now and not wait until later. Just real quickly, one of the things we like to highlight here is we always deal with your ERP's inbound and outbound data requirements, even if there's customization sitting there. And then likewise, when we deal with your trading partners, we always ask, what is your inbound and outbound data format requirement? Because as soon as you go to one of these companies and say, you need to make a change or we need something a little differently, if it's a big thing like Home Depot, they'll just say no. If it's a more medium size, they may say yes, but now it's a project on their list. And who knows, as we all know, a low priority project, who knows when that will ever come about. And this is something from our website. It just shows our customer at the bottom has a single link to our data center. They always send data out in their native format, and data always comes in their native format. And then we can connect them to any other entity out there in the world, and conform to their communication requirement and map it to and from their data requirements. So as you can see, everything's pushed into the circle in the middle from the perspective of our customers. And everyone can see through this. Our key point here is this is almost immediate and very concrete return on investment. You really don't start paying anything until you are getting a concrete advantage. So there is no real upfront investment other than generating some tests or reviewing some tests. So, there is absolutely no reason not to, at least step into the shallow end of the pool with this thing. The longer you wait, the more business efficiency you're losing. And this is something that, we like to say, and this is a hard point we have with our prospects. Is what we get a lot of times is they say, we don't believe it can be this easy. This sounds too good to be true, because by electronically doing this, your transactions, your interactions are higher quality. It's a lower cost than you can do it manually or by yourself, and it cuts down the implementation time and the time that you're exchanging this information with your business partners. So there's really nothing but gain in this. So as we said, you certainly can continue on with your manual or limp along with only partial EDI implementations, but you can see the way the world's going with the Amazon and the e-commerce, that you're not going to be able to do this indefinitely and still be competitive. So this is something that we believe everyone needs to do, and sooner rather than later. And let's see if we've got, let's see.
You ready for Q&A, David?
Yeah, I am.
There's a couple of them up there right now from Josh. But one of them was a comment from Josh. I think the other one, he's asking about charges for non-EDI transactions.
Yeah, I guess I'm not.
And while David, you're not seeing, that's okay. And if anybody else has a question, now's a good time to type it in, or you can raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. But right now, David, what I'm seeing is a question from Josh saying, what are the charges for non-EDI transactions?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what a non-EDI transaction would be.
I guess what he's referring to is something in a non-traditional EDI format. Oh, he's saying a manual transaction.
Oh, that what we're seeing across the board. I mean, I'd say. Oh, he's saying it's a statement, not a question. Yeah. So what we're seeing is manual transactions. I mean, most people tag that at $10 to $15. I use $5 to $7 as a very conservative estimate. You can see that the Honeywell number from 7 years ago was 51 cents an order line. So so I think he's saying it's $250 outrageous for a manual transaction. I literally have been to a shingle manufacturer supplier, and they said that they had done numbers, and their internal number was a purchase order cost them $125 a piece to do manually. And I was like, that doesn't, how in the world can that make any sense? And they said, well, just think about it. We just key in one value wrong, and we ship out 3 times as many shingles as was required, and now we have to pay a whole truckload of shingles to come back. So they had internally done this number, and they felt very very confident in that. But again, I like to use something more conservative. I think $5 to $7 manual transaction is low, but I also counter that it's not an unreasonable number as a straw man to start with.
Versus the cost of doing it electronically, which is pennies.
Another question is, have you processed ION BODs from SX? Are BODs any more problematic? We're working with Infor on their ION cloud implementation, and from our standpoint, BODs are no different than any other data specification. In this case, it's a particular XML format, so we can map to and from that. Now, as far as being problematic, the only thing we've encountered is, since this whole entree into the cloud suite is new for Infor, they are playing catch-up generating the BOD specifications for the inbound and outbound transactions. So as I said earlier, we can do 42 different type of business transactions. They don't currently have all of those BOD specifications in place.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions?
Nobody is raising their hand right now, David. I don't see any other questions coming in. So this is probably a good time to wrap it up. And for TUG's standpoint, thank you for doing the webinar. It's very informational.
Thanks, and we're going to be a proud sponsor at TUG, so we'll have a booth there, and booth 37, so anyone that's coming to TUG, and I highly recommend that you do if you're not considering it, please stop by and see us.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
and
Gary.
everybody have a great day. All right. Take care.